Some years ago, I saw a documentary about Saddam Hussein and his rise to power. It was on YouTube. And in that documentary, there was a really, really horrible, chilling scene where Saddam was sitting on a stage, looking very confident, calm, like he had all the authority. He was in front of a room full of all his closest and most loyal advisors and friends. So they're out in the audience while he's on the stage, and it looked pretty full. Now I don't remember the exact topic of the speech, but I do remember an uncomfortable silence as this guy was at a podium talking to the audience while Saddam was like sitting a little bit behind him. What you can also see in the video is looks of confusion of people in the crowd, which turned into fear as the guy who was speaking and Saddam began to point to each man who he felt was a traitor. So each man he pointed to was immediately removed from the room and executed right there on the spot. No questions were asked and no answers were given. Now, according to the narrator of the documentary, this was evidence of Saddam's paranoia, because these men were really his most loyal confidants. According to the narrator, they'd done nothing wrong, but without the opportunity to understand what was happening or even the chance to ask why, they were killed by nothing more than Saddam pointing his finger. Now, of course, the men who were witnessing this total madness, seeing their close friends removed from that room and hearing outside a quick and violent execution, they had no idea if they were next. Can you imagine being in that situation? I can only imagine the terror they must have felt as they wondered if he would point to them next and they would in the next few seconds be dead. In that moment, the men in that audience had no power, no will, no control, and no escape. All they had was uncertainty and a deep, deep, dark fear of death. I wasn't there, but if you look at this video, look at their faces, and I mean, I'm human, okay? I can certainly imagine that that's how it was. Now, the most fascinating thing happened at this point. Okay, I'm gonna have to find the video and link it so y'all can watch it. From this deep, dark fear was born the most remarkable thing. Praise and worship. Out of this lack of control, absence of free will, totally diminished power, blossomed the most intense outpouring of worship, praise, and reverence for the man who did have all the power, Saddam Hussein. I mean, in the video, cacophonous. I mean, cries of "Long live Saddam" filled the space. These men, I'm telling you, you could almost feel it watching the video. They began applauding and shouting, drowning out the sounds of their friends who were being murdered outside, okay? Wealthy, influential, respectable men, okay, in all their eyes, fell to their knees in tears as they literally reached out their arms to this all-powerful, almighty leader to shout of their undying love and unquestionable loyalty. For someone with all that power to spare their lives, can you imagine how special they must have felt? How much purpose they must have felt they had? Saddam could have pointed at them, but he chose not to. And not because they were so good, but because Saddam was so powerful. And in that moment, in their minds, he made the choice to live for them. It was his choice whether they lived or died, not theirs. Now, the fear that had, just moments before told them doom was coming was now transformed to love for this one who could, just by pointing his finger, determine whether they lived or died. I'm sure in that moment, these men did not love Saddam. They did not. I'm sure they did not fall down and worship just for the hell of it, or because Saddam was so wonderful and, so wonderful. Chances are they despised and hated this man for reducing them to this, to being beggars, liars to themselves, and deniers of, they probably totally despised him in that moment. But they felt they had no choice. These men had to live a lie in order to exist. They had to live a lie to take their next breath. They had to pretend to love someone they detested in order to safely see another day. It was fear of death that was the fuel behind their worship. It was fear of annihilation that caused all of that praise. Now, you can probably see where I'm going with this. Since I published Firing God, I've come to see several things. I see that my worship and praise for the idea of God as I was growing up was a cover for my intense fear of him. Because I didn't know who this was, but I'm being told every day, he could kill you if he wanted to. Now, as a child, I'm hearing this. As a child, I'm hearing this and believing this. So underneath the praise that I was giving as a child, I remember being 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like single digits. Okay. But eventually under that praise was fear. And then the fear started to transform to hate, but of course I couldn't say that. So while I was in church worshiping, and this is not just me. I'm telling the truth. Okay. I'm the one telling the truth. Some of you listening to this won't be ready to tell the truth, but that what I'm saying is true. Okay. It's under the guise of worship that I was really, I was expressing my hatred and fear because of what the system of beliefs that I called God had done, was doing to me, the power that he had over me. That's what he did. And what did he do? He took away my choice. I had no choice. Free will for what? If you're telling me that just, with the blink of an eye or a snap of a finger or something, I could die, how is that free will? Free will to worship or not. That's basically what it was. So when I say he, I'm talking about like the belief system, right? It had taken control of my life. I did not love him for that. I hated him. I pretended to come willingly to worship and praise him because I had no choice. I had no choice if I wanted to live. He had all the power. I didn't want to die, so I had to sing, lift my hands, cry, and acknowledge him, as the one who had all the power. Now, I had to do this, not because I loved him, but because I was afraid. I was afraid that he would point at me and take the one thing he's allowed me to keep, which is my life. But he was me the entire time. He was and is today my own system of beliefs. Now listen, I've gotten several nods of concern from individuals who've heard the title of my book. They're seriously concerned for my life and the life of my family. They're concerned that God will choose for me, make the decision for death and hell. Now, why would he do that? Because he can. Okay? It's not his choice. It's his choice, not mine. And like Saddam in that room, all those years ago. He has the power to choose for me. Now, since I no longer buy into the reverence and praise, I understand that they're lovingly reminding me of the fear that compels us all to worship. I have to worship, praise, serve, and love. If not, I'm going to die. Then die I must. You know, I can no longer hide the hate. I could no longer suppress the fear. It's all here. It's all around me. I had to acknowledge the obvious. So that's what I did. In my book, Firing God, I talk about how I told the truth. To really feel the hatred and look at the fear has been the most freeing experience I've ever had to date. It's by telling the truth that I can see it's all been a mistake. God has done nothing, and neither have I. My will is free, and it always has been free. Fear of death is nonsense. It's even laughable. Okay? I've always been this, and I'll always be this, but I'll never see this until I look, until I tell the truth. For me, the journey to awakening was not about finding the truth. It was about telling the truth. Telling a very simple and obvious truth.